Battle is over. Not a single muscle on the man's face twitched. He only slightly protruded his lower lip. Exterminate the enemy! It seems to have begun, were the words of the man who stood outside the door of the building and watched everything that was happening on the street. Only his eyes were visible through the cracks of the slightly open doors. Outside the door, on the street, the men from the Flying Serpent clan were fighting the spies belligerently, even with a small smile on their faces. But some of them were unlucky and died from the katana of their opponents. After this, the look of the man hiding behind the door became even wider and more surprised. It turns out that everything that was happening was observed by a reborn doctor in the body of a little boy. The same eye in the crack of the door. He has a short haircut, with a white net and a blue ribbon tied behind his hair. Dressed in a blue jacket. The boy returned to a large room, bright with 3 beds and a screen. He hoped that the man lying on one of the beds had already woken up, but he was wrong. The little doctor came closer to him and thought a little about what awaited him in the future. The man lying on the bed was covered with a blanket from the appearance, a long, slightly sharp tip of the nose and black hair. Standing over him and looking into his face, he even began to think that it would be better for him not to wake up at all. Amazing, right? Such a large detachment was sent to kill a child. It looks like it's not an adult man lying in the bed at all, but a child. The little doctor is angry with people who want to get to a lying child. He is sure that they will stop at nothing. In his memory, he imagined people from the Flying Serpent clan. Middle-aged men stand with their heads raised proudly. The boy knows that they are strong and will win anyway. Even if a lot of blood has to be shed, on the ground engulfed in flames stands another young and courageous man. Perhaps this would deal a fatal blow to the Flying Serpent. In the picture, the warriors are holding flags.
If this happened, many escort carriers would rise to take his place and seize control of the Yangtze. The calm picture in my memory was replaced by a battle between 2 warring clans.
The boy's gaze became even more serious than before. He understood that even more troubles would await them further. He sat down on the bed, resting his hands on the light bed linen. His bed was next to the sleeping one's bed, separated only by a small nightstand. He thought that at such a time only the sleeping boy opposite was at peace. Suddenly the sleeper's mouth opened slightly and quiet sounds began to come from them. With a mixture of surprise and a little fear, the boy looked at his neighbor. At that moment, quiet sounds were replaced by the wild scream of the patient. The young doctor stared at him in shock, not knowing what to do. He thought that he could wake him up, but remembered that they had already tried to do this, and there was no result from it. Watching him all the time, he assumed that it was not nightmares that were tormenting him. Or maybe it's all about the smell of blood coming from outside. Determined, the boy sat down near a small cabinet and began to look for fragrant herbs, opening the upper part. He pulled the box even further, and at the very end, he found a fairly large bundle of herbs. Without thinking, he took it out. He looks at the find with a joyful look, maybe even with a bit of cunning. Next, the doctor lit a large red candle. Afterwards, the flame spread to 2 more. 3 lit candles stand on stands and a red rug spread on the table. Having opened the package, the boy did not understand what kind of herbs they were, but he did not stop hoping that they would help cover up the smell of blood. The bedridden patient was still screaming on the bed. "You should not anger the deadly star of the sky. This star is capable of controlling a person's life, and in astrology, it is considered a bad omen." The patient's face even became a little sadder than before, but his cry never died down. Just as suddenly the screaming began, so suddenly it ended. The boy became quiet and continued to sleep. The herbs seemed to have worked. The little doctor stands by his bed, folding his arms back and looking at the boy, quietly saying, "Be careful with me, boy. You may be the main character, but you have to treat me well." He said this with a slight grin on his cute, childish face. The tired doctor sat down on his bed, deciding that going out during the battle was not the best idea. His hair was a little disheveled, and he was wearing a blue robe kimono tied with a white belt. "It's better not to fall asleep tonight," said the doctor. He was still sitting on top of the blanket. His feet didn't reach the floor. The gaze is fixed on the again, quietly sleeping boy lying opposite. On the chest of drawers between the beds, 2 large red candles are burning. And outside the door at this time, the battle can be considered over. In the middle of Sihewan, there are dead spies, and throughout the territory and even on the broken roofs of houses, people from the Flying Snake clan are scurrying around. The little doctor did not hear any sounds outside the door, and was a little surprised at the silence. "Is that really it? You can't hear the screams, the smell of blood is weakening." He went to the door to make sure his words were correct. Coming closer, he opened the door and looked out a little into the street. And there, healers run past the door. After the massacre, many wounded people from the Flying Snake clan appeared. All the doctors in their clan ran to save the patients. The boy opened the door wider. He opened his mouth slightly, glad that thanks to his actions, everything was finally over. I managed to change the course of events in which many people were originally supposed to die. People are still scurrying about on the street, talking about something and gesturing with their hands. The boy closed the door to the building and began to think what he should do. He decided that he would not tell anyone about his abilities, but would simply quietly help the flying serpent. His thoughts were again mired in memories. While still an adult man, he protected 2 children with himself. Questions popped into his head. Are they alive now? And why did I even save them? Why didn't I leave them? There are so many questions he doesn't know the answers to. Suddenly, sounds were heard again from the patient. The doctor turned in his direction, not knowing what was happening to him. It seemed to him that he was not breathing, a temporary cessation of breathing, but it had lasted for more than 2 minutes. The guy began to worry. He began shouting the name of the person lying down, "Ye-ha-ryun, come to your senses," and bent over the man lying down, and he, in turn, opened his eye wide with a red, oval pupil. Ye-han-ryun grabbed the boy by the neck. He was surprised at such strength and tried to get out, but it was all in vain. And then he decided to push the burning candle. The candle fell on the bed and set the bed on fire. The gaze of the lying man looked fascinated at the reflections of the flaring flame. Ye-han-ryun looked at the doctor as if in a coma, not understanding anything and not reacting to anything. His face was calm and just a little sad. The boy's hand stopped squeezing the doctor's throat. Because of the fire, he calmed down and is no longer aggressive. The doctor realized that Ye-han-ryun was indeed controlled by the deadly star of the sky. The boy said a few words. The little doctor was surprised at this coincidence of circumstances. His face was illuminated by the light from the flames of the fire. With his hand, the doctor grabbed Ye-han-ryun's hand that was holding his neck. The doctor still managed to throw off someone else's hand. The truth was, now his hand was grabbed. But since Ye-han-ryun was still weak, he let her go and lay down in a restless position. His mouth was open, his hair was scattered across the pillow, and his hands and fingers were located chaotically. Because the boy abruptly let go of the little doctor's hand, he flew to the floor, to another bed, resting his hands on the floor. The boy lying on the bed turned over a little on his side, placing his hands in front of his head. The flames flared up more and more near them. The doctor began to cough from the smoke that came from the fire. Coughing, he grabbed his neck with his left hand, clenched his right hand in a fist, and pulled it back. Also, his cough was facilitated by the sudden appearance of air in his lungs. He can breathe again. Phew, finally let go! The little doctor began to take slow breaths. With one jerk, Ye-han-ryun rose from the bed and prepared to attack the doctor standing in front of him. He spread his legs wide, moved his arms to the sides, and clenched them into fists. His face conveyed all his aggression. He was dressed in a white robe with a white belt. His eyes became even redder than before. Maybe it's out of anger or something else, more serious. The blood flow accelerates. The desire to destroy intensifies. The guy took the pose of a predator, for example, a panther. The back leg is bent at the knee and pushed back. The right leg is in the same state, but only in front, and the arms are bent and rest on the floor and the bed. The hair falls down, and the eyes glow scarlet. Sitting on the floor and leaning on the bed, the little doctor observed changes in the patient's behavior. The guy's hands were in black gloves. He had a bun on his head, wrapped in a white net, and tied with a blue ribbon. The patient came closer to the doctor sitting on the floor. It looks like he's about to attack. We need to calm down this killer, thought the doctor. And at this time, the guy's pupils completely disappeared. Now his eye is pure white. His eyebrows are drawn low, and his parted mouth is twisted into a grin. A shock of black hair covers his right eye. The patient began to approach, and the doctor, frightened, quickly climbed onto the bedside table. He told himself not to panic, but he seemed to be doing a bad job of it. He began to look for a way to get out of this situation. The patient seemed to go wild and with a ferocious face rushed at the guy. His hair became even more disheveled, and he opened his mouth and clenched his teeth tightly. The doctor did not lag behind, his face exactly the same as that of the patient. Also, he finally came up with a way out of the situation. Ye-han-ryun raised his right hand above his head with a furious expression on his face. His fingers became more like pazuri or elongated claws. He opened his mouth and fangs protruded from it. His pupils were still empty, and his eyebrows were lowered. The doctor thought that all the inhabitants of Kanho are like two sides of a sword. From furious, his gaze changed to decisive. And in the patient's eyes, pupils finally appeared. He froze right in front of the doctor's face. Both guys froze on the bed. The doctor, sitting on the other side of the bed, with his legs bent and his hands resting on the bed, and the patient on his knees with his hand raised to strike. Looking at the patient, the doctor was surprised whether his plan had really worked. Yehan Ryun looked at the guy with a surprised look. For some reason, the doctor still looked at the guy with a little fear and surprise. He pursed his mouth and widened his eyes with green pupils. Yehan Ryun recalled his past with fear in his eyes. Pictures of the past, a green-haired girl with a pink bow on the back of her head, bent over the body of a black-haired guy, taking his hand. The words, "They say that the people of Kanho are like two sides of a sword. In any case, they will shed blood." The black-haired young girl looks at the guy with tears in her eyes, but don't take these words seriously. Sobbing, she grabbed the guy's head, peering into his lifeless face. She brought her face closer to the guy's hands. We will live differently with you." Bitter tears still cover her face and flow down her cheeks in streams. Chong-hee looked slyly and contentedly at the guy's reaction. Hearing the words once spoken by his mother, Yehan Ryun froze even more in mute bewilderment. The doctor managed to put his hand on the guy's shoulder, talking about the magician and his insecurity. The doctor squeezed the guy's shoulder tighter and told him not to fall for the bloody parasite's tricks. Otherwise, he would become another of his puppets. The guy caught the words of the young doctor, and his gaze became even more saddened. Standing on his feet, Yehan Ryun towered over the little doctor. His gaze became more serious, and his bangs had already completely covered his eyes. He doesn't understand how the doctor knows the words his mother said. Sitting on the bed, the little doctor looked at a boy in a white coat standing on the floor, thinking about something. Squeezing the sheets in his hand, he began to ask the guy about the magician. Having not heard a word from him, he decided to tell him something more interesting. Cheon-hee made himself more comfortable on the bed. Everyone who wants to join the mage clan must consume the blood parasite. No exceptions. Yehan Ryun grimaced. He doesn't like this outcome of events. The bloody parasite devours the body from the inside. Within 10 days after absorption, you must take Hwandan. Otherwise, the parasite will lay eggs, and they will explode. The bloody parasite looks like a small ball, dark burgundy in color. The doctor asked the young man standing opposite him what he would do if he knew how to get rid of the parasite. Tongues of flame sparkled near them. The boy thought about it. He himself was interested in it. He ordered the guy to say his name. But the little doctor ignored his request along with the question and began to stare at him. But later, Chong-hee still briefly answered, "Who knows?" The guy stepped back a little, standing opposite the doctor. He bent his hands into fists and said that now it doesn't matter at all who he is and where he comes from. The main thing is that he knows about his intentions. They stand, each near their bed, and the flames continue to spread throughout the room. Chong-hee looked at the guy seriously. Later, he moved away a little, and Yehan Ryun took a couple of small steps towards him and asked, "Mage and you are being hunted?" The boy came even closer to the doctor and standing opposite him continued, "Where are you from?" The fire had already filled most of the room. Hearing Yehan Ryun's questions, the doctor looked back at him angrily. "Do you think I belong to one of the 8 mage families? Although they say about the children of these families that they are good spies," against the red background of the picture, 4 spies in black kimonos and evil smiles surfaced. The doctor closed his eyes with regret on his face and bowed his head. The guy turned his head to Yehan Ryun and said that in that escort, he was completely alone and without adults. Before this, the boy looked quite calmly, but now his eyes bulged wide, covered with black bangs. The doctor walked to the door and lifted a thick board towards it. The boy looked at him with a silent question on his face. The doctor brought the board even closer to the door and pushed it into the holders to close the doors. He pressed the board a little harder and it was securely closed. As the flames flared up, Yehan Ryun raised his hand to touch and call out to the young doctor standing at the door. Now he had no way out. On one side there was a flame, on the other there was a doctor, and the doors were completely closed. The guy froze in bewilderment. Raising his left hand and parting his mouth in surprise, he asked, "What did you think?" The doctor came closer to the screen, looked at the guy and replied, "This way you'll make a choice faster." The doctor looked at the guy smugly and with a smile. A cry was heard from outside. "Is there anyone inside?" "Smoke is coming. The flames are growing." The guy looked at the doctor dumbfounded, trying to hide his fear. He opened his eyes wide but closed his lips in a thin, even line. Seeing the growing flames, people began to knock on the door and call for the people inside, but no one answered them. "There are wounded inside! Open up quickly!" Inside the house, the flames are getting bigger and stronger, but Yehan Ren and the doctor are still standing in their places, near the doors, next to each other. Tilting his head to the side and smiling slyly, the doctor said threateningly, "Will you trust me, or will you die here?" To which the guy quite fearlessly replied, "I can just knock you out and run away." The little doctor smiled smugly. Afterwards, he slyly said, "Yes? Then the marks of the blow will remain on me, and if I shout that you are a spy for Mage, who do you think will be believed, you or me?" His eyes even sparkled a little. The guy looked at him angrily. He lowered his eyebrows again and clenched his teeth. A realization surfaced in his memory. He was lying immobilized, unconscious, and almost dead. "I remember. It was you who saved and cured me then." Yehan Ryun thought it was a dream, but it is reality. The flames were getting higher and higher towards the ceiling and closer to the guys. Yehan Ryun bowed his head and his hair covered his eyes again. He clenched his hands into fists and began to look at the doctor standing in front of him. "It seems that you had some other plans in mind." Looking at the boy seriously and angrily, the doctor did not hide the fact that he really had plans. But then he did not know that he was a heavenly demon, but simply wanted to save him, wanted him to live. The fire was already very close. The doctor stood near the screen and said, "There is more and more smoke. Decide." The boy did not know what to do and what to do. Clenching his fists tightly, he continued to stand near the growing flames. The doctor's gaze was tense and a little angry because the guy was stalling for time. Yehan Ryun returned the guy an uncertain but determined look. He opened his mouth slightly and bit his lower lip in thought. With anger and distrust on his face, he still had to agree and trust the doctor. A mop of black hair once again obscures his right eye. The doctor grinned cheerfully and sarcastically. Oh, that expression on his face. Although I've never killed anyone before. Someone screams loudly and pounds heavily on the door. The conversation of the young guys was interrupted by the same wild knocks on the door and loud exclamations of adults standing on the street. "Open up! Hurry up! There's a child inside!" They fiercely and as quickly as possible tried to open the door and get into the middle of the burning building. Their faces were contorted in fear of possible loss. The little doctor instantly pretended to be an ordinary little boy. The adults from the Flying Snake clan still managed to get inside, and the boy, crying and shedding his own tears, threw himself into the arms of one of the women. Save me. The woman who hugged the boy turned out to be his mother. She hugged her son tightly to her chest. "Are you scared?" Like everyone else in Siheiwan, she was dressed in a white kimono, with wide blue sleeves and a blue headband that held back her black hair. "You know how to close the door, but you couldn't open it." The boy pressed himself to his mother's chest, listening to her words and still shedding bitter tears. Yehan Ryun still stood near the flame and watched in surprise at the sudden changes in the behavior of the little doctor, not understanding what was wrong with him. Because the boy was so frightened, the residents began to try to put out the fire quickly. Mother and son stood at the entrance, and a man ran past them and headed towards Yehan Ryun. He asked, "Are you wounded?" and ordered the patient to be quickly taken to a safe place. The little doctor began to walk towards the exit, but suddenly turned around and looked into the guy's eyes with a smile. At sunrise, as the sun began to rise and illuminate the valley, the damage in Siheiwan became visible. Holes in roofs, cracks in houses, and smoke from a burning building. A little further away, the man looked into a hole, either in the roof or in the floor. A huge black bag hung at the edges of the hole, and the man called everyone to it. On the ground lay people from the Flying Snake clan, some wounded, some already dead. One of the lying ones had the tip of a sword sticking out of his chest. Doctors and healthy people put the wounded on stretchers and carried them to a safe place for possible treatment. Hey, my legs!" shouted the wounded man on the stretcher, squeezing his hand behind his shoulder. There was incredible pain on his face. Among all the sick, an elderly man walked. He raised his hand up, asking him to make way for them with another badly wounded soldier. On a table in one of the rooms of the building, there are all kinds of gauze, cotton wool, bandages, and tourniquets. On another table, near the bandages, there are tinctures, ointments, and liquids. He's thinking about organ drainage. Will it help him? Having pushed aside the doctors and their assistants, the little doctor ran into the patient's room. He took the needle and, with a serious face, began to sew up the patient's wound. The doctors were taken aback by this. Excellent. The condition of the organs is satisfactory. The boy's gaze became even more serious than before. The boy laid out the bandages on the bed, took them down to the nearby bedside table, and began looking for something similar to an aspirator and disinfectants, and found alcohol. Pouring alcohol into the vessel, he even began to doubt that he would be able to save the patient at all. One of the observing nurses was very surprised by his actions. "What are you doing? You're not putting the internal organs back in place." Taking the cotton wool, the doctor began to moisten it with alcohol. He tried to do everything as quickly as possible. Now he placed the soaked cotton wool on his stomach, pressing hard and trying to cleanse the blood and impurities inside it. The little doctor watched as the gauze absorbed the blood. Chong-hee picked up the gauze. It was covered in blood. The doctor got down on one knee and hurriedly tried to save the patient's life. An empty can of alcohol fell to the floor, and bloody gauze flew there too. He screamed in despair, not knowing what else he could do for the patient. Even his eyes began to shine, trying not to let the tears come out. After moistening another gauze with alcohol, he again placed it on the patient, still pressing down firmly. Now, more than ever, he would need the almighty energy of this world. Now more than ever, he would need the almighty energy of this world, because Cheon-hee picked up a needle. 3 shocked doctors are watching his actions. Having threaded the necessary thread into the needle, he approached the patient, lowered the fabric covering the body, and began to sew up the deep wounds. At this time, 2 people from high society entered the temple. A reddish man in a green robe and a blue-eyed man in a white skirt, blue kimono, and black cape. A senior doctor approached them and spoke about the tragedy, listing the wounded and, unfortunately, the dead. The gaze of a handsome man with long white hair was attracted by movements to the right, and she turned her head there. Together with her, the man who had arrived earlier turned and became angry. That child, and the child, along with 3 doctors, stood by the patient's body and tried with all his might to bring him back to life. The man lying on the bed had a handsome physique, a manly face and black hair tied in a bun, and his white pants and shirt were covered in blood. A sword hilt with a blade inside stuck out from his chest. His right lung was punctured through and through. The little doctor opened the top drawer in the chest of drawers and tried to find something that looked like a scalpel. From such a tense situation, beads of sweat began to flow down the guy. He didn't find a scalpel, but he did find a wide throwing knife. There are no other options yet. Now he's got a throwing knife. The doctors again stared at the guy in shock, but they did not interfere with his actions, but only stood around the bed, clasped their hands behind their backs, and silently watched. The doctor was a little angry at such impudence, and therefore, in a rage, turned his head to the people standing behind him and ordered them not to stand, but to help him. He ordered the patient to do chomkel. This is a technique for immobilizing the enemy by striking certain acupuncture points. It is also used to stop bleeding by pressing on these points. The doctor knows that Kano has such a technique, and he is going to use it right now. A sick man with pain on his face and tightly clenched teeth watches the guy's fingers approach his chest. He tries to hold back his loud screams. "If I stop the bleeding, the chance to save him will increase." A white-haired man approached the guy. He turned in her direction in fear and surprise and froze in an attempt to pull out the sword. The man watches his actions with interest and sternness. "Do you think this will help?" He frowned his blue eyes. The doctor finally froze and recovered from shock. "I'm pulling it out. Doctors, control the wound." The man is still watching him. The boy, carefully prepared to take out the sword, grabbed the handle tightly with his hands and began to lift it up. The doctors held the patient tightly by the chest and waist. Even the blue-eyed man began to help them, watching all the actions with interest. When the doctor pulled out the sword a little, blood began to gush out of his lungs like a fountain. Everyone who helped the doctor stared at the opened wound. After the sword was completely removed, there was even more blood, and the boy began to worry about how to stop the bleeding. The man came closer to the guy and with a serious and interested look in his blue eyes asked, "Is it all about the blood?" The young doctor ignored his question as the patient began to arch his back. All the doctors present began to hold the patient even tighter. After such actions, the white-haired man called his red-haired assistant. "Yuho!" Hearing the owner's cry, Yuho immediately ran to him. He grimaced and flexed his right arm, summoning magic. "Juho! Why is he here?" The young doctor did not understand this, and the red-haired guy with yellow eyes and a serious face had already summoned and released his power outward to the wound of the patient. The boy looked in surprise at his patient and the blood splashes. The young doctor's eyes became even wider and seemed to sparkle. It turned out that he was happily surprised as he watched Yuho use the void-filling matter. The red-haired guy stood at the patient's feet and used his magic. The patient's blood turned into a stream, hanging over the patient and slightly surrounding the magician's hand. The doctors looked at the guy with their mouths open. His face was serious and concentrated. His eyes were wide open, and his hair flew to the sides. The little doctor looked with admiration at the whirlpool of blood. He had seen this for the first time and really hoped that Juho's actions would help the wounded soldier lying right under his hands. The boy was still constantly and happily watching the red-haired man. "Damn! Now is not the time to admire!" Having come to his senses, the doctor again looked at the patient's wound and the blood hanging in the air. With a determined face, he approached the lying man. This should help. And taking a throwing knife in his hands, he ran it over the wounded man's body. The boy regretted that his medical skills became known to everyone. Afterwards, he picked up a needle and began to sew up the open wound. And the blue-eyed man watched all the actions of the little doctor. After the wound was stitched, the boy tiredly rubbed his forehead. The owner, a white-haired man, extended his hands forward with a smile. On the other side of the wall, there are 2 more beds with lying soldiers. And next to each, there is a doctor. A man entered the room who had previously been involved in a fight with a spy. Walking a little deeper into the room, he asked about the condition of all the soldiers, the number of wounded and dead. A little later, he noticed the blue-eyed ruler. Reaching the screen and walking towards the man, the doctors told him about 2 deceased warriors from the Flying Serpent clan. On the man's left hand walked a gray-haired girl with a doula on her head. Approaching the Lord, the clan leader expressed his gratitude to him for saving his people. After a short period of time, the white-haired man spoke about the incredible healing skills of the little doctor. Even the leader himself did not immediately believe it. The girl who was walking with the man stared at something in surprise, and she looked at the doctor sleeping against the wall. Apparently he was very tired since he fell asleep so quickly and not even on the bed. The Lord ordered Yuho to take the boy to bed. A lot happened this night. He was exhausted. Jars and gauze with bandages were scattered at the boy's feet. Juho picked the boy up, his head resting on the boy's shoulder. Saliva flowed from the little guy's mouth, and the guy held him with his hand. After that day, throughout the company they began to talk about Chincheonchi's outstanding healing abilities. Morning. Warm, sunny weather. There are people moving back and forth in the Sihewan courtyard again. 3 men stand under the wall of one of the houses and talk about spies taken hostage. They do not give up and are silent even after torture. And if you turn away from them, they immediately try to commit suicide. Therefore, for such a matter, they are going to call the masters from Vra Hao. The men continue to think about the purpose of the spies' attack. Probably their target was the young Mrs. Conson, since they have nothing to steal. A voice from under the white and gold doors. It's convenient to be small. You can easily crawl through and hide everywhere. The doors opened slightly and a boy's eye appeared in the socket. He put a bun in his mouth. Having sat down more comfortably and placing a basket of pies next to him, the boy continued to eavesdrop on the adults' conversation. On the other side of the door, those 3 men are standing and talking about Conson Hyun's arrival, about her hatred of her sister and averting suspicion. When the word came about the child, the boy froze and listened. Are they talking about me? They found hand marks on the throat, but everything is fine. They say the child sleeping next to him had a nightmare, said one of the men. They did not understand how they could do this to him because he had done a lot for their escort. The 3 men continued to discuss Cheon-chi, the little doctor. He is very kind and reasonable, but is Cheon-chi deliberately covering up that boy's misdeeds? Continuing to eat the bun and listen, the doctor realized that these 3 men were on his side. Even the head began to look for an ointment to heal Cheon-chi's neck, but Pyeok-rin Uiseong beat him to it. The boy took a bite of the bun. Not shy, but golden, the men continued, and the boy dived into the basket with his hand to get more delicacies. They seem to think that Hyun has a malicious intent to kill her cousin Yeon. Looking again through the gap between the doors and with a condescending expression on his face, the boy realized that they knew nothing about Hen. The boy found out that she was going to give Yeon the place of head of the family, and it seems that she has already begun the search for those robber spies. The boy was very surprised by something. His eyes instantly became wider. The doors opened in front of the boy, and a black-haired young guy stood in their opening. His bangs hid his eyes. And I was wondering where you went, kid. That guy turned out to be Ye Han Ryun. He looked at the guy a little angrily, and with a drop of surprise, the pupils disappeared from his eyes again. Siheyuan has already been completely rebuilt. Everything looks as if there was no battle. Clean green grass, the roof has no holes. A little further from the village, on the mountain, the young guys continue their conversation. Yehan Ryun was interested in what the guy wanted from him. And sitting on a large stone, Cheon-chi answered him, "Nothing." The boy standing next to him was surprised at this answer, and the young doctor began to tell him about his rescues of half-dead people, about how Sangon discovered the poison, and the escort managed to prepare for the attack in advance, and about his courtship of the sick Yehan Ryun. "And this is my gratitude?" the boy asked, pointing to his neck with marks of suffocation. Yehan Ryun looked at the boy angrily and, clenching his teeth together, offered him a deal. The little doctor looked down condescendingly and said that he had changed his mind because he could no longer trust the guy. Yehan Ryun looked in surprise at the guy sitting on the stone and asked, "Are you expecting an apology or something?" Cheon-chi glared at the surprised guy. The little doctor proudly stuck his chest forward. "Okay, from today on, call me Hen." In terrible surprise, Yehan Ryun looked at the guy. He flashed his eyes angrily and asked in bewilderment, "What? Are you offering to fraternize?" Yehan Ryun was unhappy with this request and shouted at the guy, saying that it was strange. The boy was surprised by this reaction, as if the guy had said something stupid. Sitting on a stone, Cheon-chi assured the guy of his seniority, to which he invited them to fight. The boy made a funny face when he heard such a proposal. "Do you want to fight a civilian who doesn't even know martial arts? Why are you so angry?" Yehan Ryun stopped this, in his opinion, awkward flow of words by putting his right hand forward. Against the backdrop of the beautiful blue sky, Yehan Ryun's words now sounded, "Call me Hyun." The boy put his hands forward and agreed to a forced fight. Yehan Ryun grimaced and said that some nonsense was happening. Standing sideways to the guy, Cheon-chi asked to say Hyung while the guy watched him. Yehan Ryun glared at the boy again, but he immediately humbly bowed his head down and closed his eyes. The guy still stood humbly and finally said, "Hen." The boy shouted and ordered him, "Louder!" Yehan Ryun shuddered in surprise. He had to shout louder. But Cheon-chi didn't like it again and again ordered, "Clearer!" The guy had to obey again. The boy looked at him with a malicious grin, folding his hands at his sides. Cheon-chi happily thanked the guy, but he seemed ashamed that he had listened to some youngster and would now call him elder. Someone was watching the two guys. It was a black-haired girl with ponytails. Her elastic bands were in the form of beads. The girl came closer and waved her hand in greeting, and the young people answered her in kind. Yehan Ryun was still in a gloomy mood. Cheon-chi grimaced. He didn't like the nickname the girl gave him, Baby Savior. As it turned out, the girl was collecting medicinal herbs for her sister and asked the little doctor for help in choosing. But unfortunately, he hardly studied them, and therefore does not understand them. The girl cheerfully extended her hand to the boy. "But will you help me?" And Yehan Ryun watched them from the side. Both guys looked surprised. Approaching a bush with berries, Cheon-chi stared at them as if he had never seen them before. Yehan Ryun was surprised by such incomprehensible joy and did not understand what was wrong with it. And the girl just smiled and laughed cheerfully. A beautiful clearing with bushes on stones and tree branches. "So, Yehan Ryun and I became brothers." The young people had a picnic and brewed hot green tea. We chatted about all sorts of things with the sisters Hyun and Yeon. The boy liked the cheerful Yeon. All three of them sat at the table, talked, and drank delicious tea. But Yehan Ryun again did not join their atmosphere. A little later, the girl brought Cheon-chi to the temple and gave him a gift. The gift turned out to be Hyuk-song's wind blade. It has a black point, a red handle, and a black feather hanging from it. The boy looked with admiration at the blade given to him. Its dark blade does not reflect light, making it well suited for secret missions. He took it in his hand and turned it horizontally. For some unknown reason, he began to refuse to take it. The girl did not understand his refusal. The blade she gave was a thank you for saving her, but the boy still tried to give it away. Yeon said that the blade does not suit her abilities as a swordsman, and in order not to give it to her family, she would rather give it to Cheon-chi. The girl curved her mouth into a smile. She would be pleased if the boy agreed. Cheon-chi squeezed the hilt of the blade again and raised it to his face. His eyes sparkled and he agreed to accept it. He also asked me to teach him how to use it. Over time, in the middle of the building, there is a large stage or ring for a fight. On the sides, a little further away, there are small houses, tents for spectators. A black-haired girl with a serious look and compressed lips, and another girl with the same hair color. But her hair is gathered in a bun at the back of her head, and loose strands lie on her shoulders. Her blue eyes look into the distance. Kansen technique. Cheon-chi's gaze is also seriously and decisively directed forward. One of the girls stood in a pose and held in her hands the Kansen Panwe sword, the swings of which resembled flashes. She swung her sword and stopped it in front of her face, the tip of the knife glistening and shimmering red. The girl made sharp and fast swings of the sword. In the Kansen family, speed of movement is the most important thing. Thanks to this principle, the master of the family, Kansen Chonin, became omnipotent. The girl's hair moved almost in time with her movements. A family with a refined sword speed usually takes the elements of water and wind as a basis. Hyun raised the sword up, delicately moving it through the air as if drawing. Her sword movements are mesmerizing. And then she sharply swiped it to the lower right corner. Her eyes sparkled white with red edges. She clearly doesn't feel tired. When she swung her sword, a bright light appeared from his movements, and the girl's pose resembled a dance. This is the appearance of a young but gifted genius. In the crowd of spectators stood a girl with a bun and did not look too happy at the swings of the sword on the stage. The light of the sword flew near her emotionless face, and the little doctor looked at the same movements with admiration and sparkle in his eyes. Standing in the circle of light from the sword, Hyun raised her head up and closed her eyes. Now she is in complete self-forgetfulness, but the girl sharply raised the sword up and also lowered it down, throwing it back. The principle of the Kansen sword technique is extreme. It is also the limit of counterattack. The sword cuts through the air with a clear movement, and the speed strives for maximum. Hyun opened her eyes wide and looked at the blade of the sword. This is the moment of realization. A sword with a whirlwind swirling around it. In the very center of the reflections of the sword and the silhouettes of its movement stands a girl with a weapon in her hands. The skirt and hair flutter in the air. Young bowed her head. Small puffs of smoke floated parallel to her head. A little later, after the performance, Yeon came to Hyun, accompanied by 2 guards, and congratulated her sister on reaching the peak of her skill, while clapping her hands. Yeon looked at her sister with a smile and sparkling eyes. Even the guards who came earlier congratulated Hyun, their mistress, and said that this urgently needed to be communicated to others. The girl looked at their joyful faces and how they, like little children, clenched their hands into fists, smiling cheerfully. With a condescending face and a fist raised to her lips, she said that they embarrassed her and that it was all thanks to Jin Cheon-hee. The guards looked in the direction of the guy, and he was either scared or surprised by surprise. The boy again refused the girl's words and said that he was indebted to her for the gift. The girl stood next to her sister and denied the guy's words. One of the sisters' face darkened and was no longer so happy. She began to fall, and Hen stared at her in horror. When Yeon fell to the floor, her sister screamed and opened her eyes wider. They stood in the large hall, and Hyun asked the guards to raise her sister. But for some reason, I changed my mind and decided that I would raise it myself. Cheon-chi, as well as the guards, decided to watch her attempts to raise her sister. The boy realized that it was not an ordinary sword, but a sword of self-forgetfulness, and she had to spend all her strength to comprehend this technique. Yeon slept peacefully at her sister's feet, but Han still managed to lift her up a little. Later, a tired Hyun completely lifted her sister to her feet, while the guards still stood nearby and watched. The girl bowed her head with regret. Chong-hee looked at the girls and the guards with sympathy. He watched his acquaintances go down the hill, Hyun with his sister in his arms, accompanied by guards. After watching them go, Cheon-hee went to the market to look for Yehan Ryun. The market was small but spacious. In the middle of the square, there were small booths with sellers, and along its edges there was a large building and stalls at the edges. There were a lot of people milling about throughout the market. The roof of one of the buildings was the House of the Elders. When they see Cheon-hee, they get nervous because he constantly has nothing to pay for goods at the market. After visiting the market, the boy bought a tasty delicacy on a stick, similar to a sausage. He shared one such stick with Yehan Ryun and forced him to eat it all, again calling himself Hyun. The guy didn't like it, of course. Chong-hee again did not understand such a reaction, because his act was the act of a real older brother, and besides, they agreed that Yehan Ryun would call him exactly that. With a sparkle in his eyes and an innocent look, Hyun looked at the guy. Completely naive, Yehan Ryun responded with an angry look and began to eat the sausage while continuing to look at the guy. Walking a little further through the market, Cheon-hee saw a booth with tanhulu. These are sugar-coated fruits on a stick. The guy definitely wanted to buy them. Yehan Ryun, for some reason, looked angrily at the guy who was having a nice conversation with the seller while buying candy. For some reason, the guy grimaced. An unfamiliar man angrily grabbed him by the hair. After Hyun was stingy, he turned to the guy and did not find him in his previous place. The people standing in Yehan Ryun's place were arguing about something. I left for a second, and they're already in conflict? The conflicting people talked about some kind of dispute with the child. It seems the boy saw the reason for their conflict, since he stared in such surprise. The same menacing man again extended his hand forward, trying to grab the brat, but Yehan Ryun managed to quickly dodge the man's hands. He covered his furious eyes with his hand. The man raised his hand above himself in an attempt to hit the guy. But Yehan Ryun managed to swing his hand and hit the merchant in the stomach. Kaya! From the meeting of his stomach with his fist, the man froze and grimaced. Another merchant with a black ponytail decided to stand up for the man and hit the impudent man. He swung and a red semicircular beam of magic appeared in front of him. The guy managed to dodge and crouch right under the beam. The guy's serious face was again surrounded by haze or steam. The man swung again, putting his leg back and temporarily recalling the beam to himself. At the end of the beam, something similar to a small explosion happened and sparkled in the shape of a multi-rayed star. The merchant fell and landed on his butt. He stared at the guy standing over him. The man shouted loudly, "Ah!" It seems that something has awakened in Yehan Ryun because his eyes again became white and blurred with a red edge. Fragments of medium-sized stones fell from somewhere. From the guy's blow, the merchant flew back with force, opening his mouth. The guy kicked the flying man with his right foot. Afterwards, the merchant landed on the rocks. Around the chaos that was created, Yehan Ryun stood completely calm in a circle of smoke. Behind the guy, on the broken stones of the square, lay two more immobilized merchants. The previously arguing people now looked at the guy with their mouths wide open. The standing men and women were surprised by this turn of events. Unbelievable! A child defeated 3 dogs! Some were even glad that someone finally gave them prochohana. And Cheon-hee even smiled with pride. Hey, this is my little brother. And with a smile on his face, he again offered the guy a sweet candy. But Yehan Ryun didn't seem to hear the guy at all, and with burning eyes silently continued to look down. Chong-hee did not immediately notice the visible changes in the guy, and was very surprised when he did notice. His eyes became wide again and his pupils constricted, and a look of horror froze on his face. The hero dealt a crushing blow, slamming his opponent into the ground, not giving him the slightest chance of victory against him. It was clear in the hero's eyes that he had absolutely no intention of feeling sorry for his opponent, and not a drop was visible in his eyes about the desire to stop beating his already defeated enemy. The crowd standing next to what was happening saw drops of blood flying from the hero's wounded rival, and all the people in the crowd were maximally shocked by his unstoppable rage. A shocked boy dressed in a purple kimono, screaming and asking what the distraught protagonist was doing, ran to them to calm him down. Otherwise, the death of the hero's rival would have been unavoidable. The hero, in a rage, grabbed his opponent, who was already unconscious, and was about to deliver the final finishing blow to accurately send his defeated enemy to the next world. The little hero, dressed in a purple kimono, ran towards the furious hero holding Tanula in his hand. Remembering the true nature of the hero and shouting a request to stop, the little hero headed closer and closer to the battlefield. The little hero, dressed in a purple kimono, remembered that the passion for battle is the effect of the blood of a deadly star in the sky. The little hero, dressed in a purple kimono, offered the hero a tanulu, who was surprised by his appearance, to calm down, thereby surprising the furious hero even more. The fierce hero refused the offer of the little hero dressed in a purple kimono, saying that he was not finished yet because that guy used martial arts to offend the weak. He deserves to die, thought the fierce hero. The little hero was outraged and did not understand how to calm down the distraught hero who was about to finish off his almost dead opponent. The little hero handed him food. The distraught hero began to eat. To escape the influence of the deadly star of the sky, a human instinct is needed to provoke another urge. They fled the scene. You shouldn't return to the flying kite with a bloody face if you want to get along in society, said the little hero. The little hero realized that the heavenly demon had no need to worry about social life and understand anything about it. If he can beat up someone he doesn't like. Out of nowhere, someone shouted that he was glad to see his savior. The little hero turned and realized that it was his uncle. In front of them were 2 people with a child in their arms. According to them, they came running to them as soon as they heard about what happened in the market. The little hero asked whose child it was in his arms. The man replied that this was his son, who was born and grew up while he was away. The man said that his son's name was Cheon Lee and showed him the little hero who saved his father's life. The man said that he named him in honor of his savior and invited the little hero to support him in his arms, and he kindly agreed and said that he would soon begin to walk. The man thanked them for the fact that his trip ended successfully for him. Now he is retiring and explained that Hyung Nim was going to make him the new head of the escort. But he has something to regret, so that trip was his last. The man once again thanked them for giving him a chance to devote his life to his wife and child. The child took the hero's finger. thereby surprising the little hero that the other hero did not turn away and did not mind that the baby was doing this. The two people said goodbye to the heroes and left with the child in their arms. The kid could not take his eyes off the heroes, from whom he gradually moved away. The heroes headed to the mountains. The hero told the little hero that he was worthy to be called Hen. The hero said that their wars do nothing but kill. He always thought that it was enough to simply deal with bad people. The sword of life is just a beautiful phrase covering murder. The little hero said that he saved many people, including him and that uncle. The hero said that he would most likely continue to kill since he couldn't do anything else, and it made him feel alive. This is why the little hero is more worthy of being Hen. He was glad to hear what he heard and asked him to repeat the words about his opinion about becoming Hen. Heavenly demon, leader of mage. Having reached such ranks, he did not have the opportunity to live a normal life and experience the delights of simple happiness. The little hero asked if he would soon go to Magyo, and said that the road would not be easy if he was going to change his mind. The hero replied that he would leave as soon as the next transport appeared, and he had nowhere else to go. The hero was interested in why the little hero doesn't ask why he clings to this Magyo so much. "Did you find out something?" the hero asked. The little hero explained that he had nothing to say, and the decision was up to the hero. He definitely has some reason for this decision. The hero asked when Hen would tell him what he was hiding. Hen understood that he could always tell, but he would consider him crazy. Therefore, he promised to tell me someday later. And now Hen will tell you about what he wanted to know today: how to get rid of the bloody parasite. And it is important to do this before the hero leaves Hen. Yo Haryun left for Magyo. Hen did everything he could. The rest is in the hands of our protagonist. Hen wondered what he would do now. All this time there was a struggle for life, but now it feels like he's lost its meaning. Hyun was approached by Chin Cheon-hee, who had been looking for him for a long time. Chin Cheon-hee said that he had a serious conversation with him. They went home. Hyun was surprised that Jin Cheon-hee was going to make him his student. Chin Cheon-hee thought all this time that it was obvious. While Jin Cheon-hee calmly poured tea for the two of them, at this time, the surprised Hyun thought only that the novel did not say anything about the students. Chin Cheon-hee thought that Hyun simply did not want to be his student, to which he replied that it was simply very unexpected for him. He agrees. It's a great honor for him. Jin Cheon-hee said that he would teach Hyun everything he knows. Hyun realized that he was not joking at all, judging by his confident voice. Chin Cheon-hee thought that he still had doubts. Hen knew that he had the 9th yin disease of intermittent pulse. On the one hand, he was lucky to be his student. On the other hand, he will soon die. Since he has no children, all property will go to Hen. This is not a common disease, but an ingrained phenomenon in martial arts novels. Is there really no way to cure him? Hyun asked only to promise Jin Cheon-hee only one thing: to hold on to his life. Chin Cheon-hee didn't understand what Hyun was telling him. Hyun said that he knew about Chin Cheon-hee's fatal disease, more precisely about the characteristics of his body. However, Hyun thinks that there is one way to try to heal Jin Cheon-hee. Suddenly, Hen felt a powerful aura of evil. Yuho suddenly appeared behind Chin Cheon-hee. Hyun didn't understand at all why Yuho suddenly got so angry, and thereby frightened him beyond belief with his appearance. Frightened Hyun wondered if the furious Juho, who was so frightening, was not just a minor character who was mentioned only a couple of times in the first volume. Jin Cheon-hee noticed Yuho behind him and asked him to stop his rage, thereby calming down the frightened Hyun. Yuho shouted to Jin Cheon-hee that Hyun was communicating with his teacher in an inappropriate manner and that this was very annoying to him. Hen knew how painful it was for a patient in the final stages of cancer to hear that there might be a cure, and even a small chance of curing such a painful disease. Sitting at the table, Hen understood that hope is more cruel than despair. It makes a person cry and feel helpless. He ultimately dies in terrible suffering. But at the same time, what's wrong with that? Is it not the duty of any doctor to tell any truth? Life is a chance. You can't just give it up so easily. Jin Cheon-hee replied to Hyun that he was neither going to accept treatment nor give up, and Chin Cheon-hee is not going to die a peaceful death at all. Hyun was absolutely not happy with Jin Cheon-hee's decision about his life. Hyun stood up from the table and shouted, hoping to be heard, that Jin Cheon-hee had a chance to be saved from his illness. Hen was angry that his future teacher was talking such nonsense. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee shouted to Hyun to stop shouting and calmly sit back at their shared table. Teacher Chin Cheon-hee completely changed his face and told Hyun that this was a completely unfortunate topic for ridicule. Hyun calmed down and thought about the future of Jin Cheon-hee. Hyun saw that his future teacher, Jin Cheon-hee, had completely changed his face, although he had always behaved nicely and politely. He seemed extraordinary and received incredible love from those around him. However, now Hyun sees in front of him a completely different person, completely different from Jin Cheon-hee. What is the true appearance of his future teacher? Standing up from the table, Jin Cheon-hee exhaled and promised to listen to what Hyun was saying about his painful illness. This gave Hen a chance to convey his message and help the future teacher recover from a fatal illness. Jin Cheon-hee added that if it turns out that Hyun is just mocking him in the end, Jin Cheon-hee will take back his offer from Hyun to become his future student, and they will never see each other again. Since Hyun had long been accustomed to mistrust, he, without hesitation, immediately accepted the condition of his future teacher, Jin Cheon-hee. The hero left the temple in which Jin Cheon-hee and Yoo-ho had just been. Hen walked slowly along the path, looking at all the nature on both sides. Yoo-ho asked teacher Jin Cheon-hee what he would do with this conversation. Jin Cheon-hee said that he should believe Hyun's words. Yoo-ho had doubts and wanted to know what the teacher would do if things didn't work out. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee replied that death from this disease would not be beautiful, and he would not be able to die peacefully. He would have to fight the disease with all his might until the very end. Jin Cheon-hee recalled Hyun's words that they were all ultimately creatures doomed to lose. Of course, someday this moment will definitely come, but isn't it worth trying to win at least once? Hyun's question about Jin Cheon-hee's willingness to fight for his life from a fatal disease haunted the teacher for a long time, and he could not answer it. No matter how perfectly Jin Cheon-hee treated the Murim warriors, they continued to wound themselves out of valor, love, and malice. It seemed that they looked like moths that were flying straight towards their death. Jin Cheon-hee did not understand the point of treating them several times. Jin Cheon-hee understood that his old demon of the heart easily got out, and this made him feel so light and empty. Yoo-ho asked Jin Cheon-hee since when was he so fascinated by Hyun. The teacher admitted that he liked Hen at first sight, and is going to make him his student. Jin Cheon-hee said with a smile that he even has something to learn from Hyun, and perhaps they will switch roles. Joo-ho asked the teacher if he believed that he could recover from a serious illness. The teacher said that there are no guarantees, but there is always a chance. Jin Cheon. He noticed how surprising it was because during all this time the thought that treatment existed had never occurred to him. It will take quite a long time and it will be painful, but he will be able to live longer. Joo-ho told the teacher that he didn't like this kid at all, since he declares that he will not let the teacher die in peace. Have you ever met such tactless people? Joo-ho asked the teacher. Joo-ho said that speaking to Hen in such a manner with any of the noble families would make his head fly off his shoulders. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee calmly told Yoo-ho that it was very important for his student to have such a quality as willpower. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee added that if Hyun weren't who he is, maybe he wouldn't have shown interest in him. The teacher's answer could not convince Joo-ho. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee met with Hyun in the forest near a small pond and recalled Hyun's words about the fact that he would not let him die, to which Hyun still resolutely agreed with these words. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee asked Hyun to promise something, since being his student is not at all easy. Hen replied that he understood this perfectly well and he had a lot to learn. The teacher said that he would not only study. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee began to show some very powerful trick, which surprised Hyun very much. It was a flash from a finger, with which the teacher was able to punch a hole in the stone. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee explained that this is not at all easy to do. It is not as strong as a spear or a knife, but something on the level of Chom-hyul. Hyun was quite surprised by such an unusual trick, and teacher Jin Cheon-hee said that Hyun needed to be strong for his sake. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee added that he should also be as precise as possible in order to apply such skills in medicine. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee also struck a second blow with his technique. Hen noticed that the impact radius had become larger, even making a hole in a huge tree. Hen noticed that this technique is much more effective than targeted shooting. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee concentrated his energy in one finger, and this is not all his strength. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee told the little hero that their classes would not be the same as in military families, and Hen will be able to inherit all the teacher's endeavors, and also the great Shagel family. With complete confidence in his eyes, Hyun told teacher Jin Cheon-hee that he understood everything and would try very hard. Teacher Jin Cheon-hee added one more thing, a request to promise Hyun not to let him go to the next world so easily. Hen, with confidence in his eyes, shouted that he gave his word that he would do everything in his power. Teacher Chin Cheon-hee was delighted and asked Hyun to bow 9 times. As a sign of this, he makes an oath to his teacher. The students asked Hen if he was leaving soon, as it turned out very soon. The teacher left the escort for a short time on errands. He explained to the students that the teacher told him that as soon as he finished, they would immediately leave because he himself could not yet, and the teacher would not allow him. One of the students was a little jealous and thought that it was a pity that such an ordinary boy became the first student of such Mr. Ui-sung. This disappointed the guy a little, but Hyun interrupted his thoughts. Hen was glad that the students finally felt better, and now they could walk in peace. At his words, everyone laughed, which made the young guy very embarrassed. The girl said that they recovered faster thanks to Hen's care, but said that she wouldn't mind resting for a while. After a little time of conversation, the girl also asked what was behind the guy's back, what he was holding and hiding there all the time. Conversation. The guy was embarrassed by the question. An awkward smile appeared on him. He said that all the time he hid the head's gifts, because he was very upset by the student's departure. The teacher was too generous towards Hyun, and he was embarrassed to show all the valuable gifts. The girl again got lost in her thoughts and remembered that Baekrin Ui-sung was being sought by all the warriors, and he had very little time to live. Maybe that's why he gave all his valuable things and knowledge to Jin Cheon-hee. She looked at the guy who stood with a smile and thought that in the future he could become the next Baekrin Ui-sung. The girl kept thinking about Hen's future. While he is little, they should treat him well because when he grows up and all the families turn to him, it may be too late. The girl said that she had prepared something for the guy. He was very surprised. He didn't even imagine what was there. But the girl still insisted that he accept a small gift from her. The guy told her that she could address him simply as you. The girl was a little embarrassed and moved the box a little closer to Hyun. The guy was very surprised by such a gift because the box looked very expensive and he was embarrassed to take it, but the girl just smiled and insisted that he take it. The girl said that it was just a cheongseondan, nothing special, and he shouldn't worry. But these words put the guy into even greater shock. He thought that it was like a hwandan, only it was created from 1,000-year-old juicy. Emotions did not leave Hyun. He froze in place. Hyun said in her head that it is a very special gift. It is used to treat internal wounds of a descendant in the direct line of the Konsong family. And there are only a few of these left. Hyun patted Hyun on the head and advised him to try it, but first let him show it to his teacher. Hyun thanked Hyun for her useful and special gift, and also said that he was incredibly happy. Through her smile, the girl thought why he couldn't refuse gifts at least once, accepting them again and again every time. The girls saw Hen off in a beautiful square in the middle of a perfectly blue sky, wishing him good luck on his journey. He said that they would definitely see each other again. The hero especially thanked Hyun for the gift, saying that it was very special and useful for him, and he would definitely use it. The girl again warned him that he should remember to show the teacher the gift before eating it. Hyun also reminded the guy to use Hoksung's blade, not to forget it. With a smile, the guy said that he will always be. In parting, the girl hugged the guy with all the warmth and thanked him for everything, but he said that he should thank him for everything she did to him. He also apologized for having previously failed to congratulate Hyun on becoming a master. Other students also happily thanked teacher Baekrin Ui-sung for his kindness and knowledge that he gave them. The teacher was very pleased to hear the words of gratitude. He told the students that he was very glad that fate brought him together with such students, praising and thanking them for everything. He also bowed to them. A beautiful picture, bright green, beautiful mountains, the greatest staircase, all in white clouds. A few months later, the picture was in the Baekrin Medicine Palace near the Flying Kite Division. The grandest staircase leads directly to the foot of the volcano, which is surrounded by huge mountains and fog. Hen walked up these stairs. He carried 2 heavy buckets of water. A voice in his head said that it was too early for him to start studying martial arts. First, he should strengthen his external energy and dungun. Each time he repeats the same movements, he will increase his internal energy, and only after all this he will be able to start studying martial arts. In addition to all of the above, correct breathing and walking are no less important for the hero's success. The guy was furious, but he knew that in order to begin studying martial arts, he must stand firmly on his feet, become one with the earth, learn different skills, and improve himself. Chin Cheon-hee said that internal energy is a strong trait of the Jegal clan, but external and physical strength is their weakness. In the clan of teachers, everyone arrogantly believed that external energy against the backdrop of strong internal energy is unimportant. The teacher said that after lessons with him and new knowledge, Hyun will become like a vessel, as strong and large, which no one can break. The teacher mentioned that only by cognizing internal energy will he be filled, because, as he said earlier, this is very important in martial arts to become a courageous hero. Hen was very happy, but he was also shocked that the teacher was offering this to an ordinary guy who had no training in anything and had no knowledge to enter into any martial arts. The first thing the teacher said was that from tomorrow the guy would wear 4 multi-tonies. Hen got angry and loudly shouted out his dissatisfaction and surprise. Why does he have so much if he can cope with 2? He was more outraged by the teacher's gaze, because he looked at him with an angelic smile and such kind eyes, without a drop of mercy and without a drop of regret towards the aspiring hero. They found themselves in a wonderful, beautiful place where, according to the teacher, his office was. Hen was surprised by such a beautiful place, surrounded by beautiful nature and unusual buildings. The teacher said that this place was nicknamed Baek Rin's Medicine Palace because of its majestic size. The building really looked gorgeous. Huge columns, beautiful decorations, towers of several floors. It looked so bad that Hen was speechless. Hyun recalled that in the novel, Baek Rin Iwi Song was in the mountainous area for treatment for a long time. The guy's gaze still remained surprised and frightened. He recognized this as the same place and again told the teacher about its size and asked if it is called huge because many patients come, or is there another reason to call it that? The teacher said that he never accepted students because he didn't need it. But he explained that this place itself is truly a famous infirmary, which interests many heroes and which saved the lives of most. Near the entrance to the building, the teacher said that they had already arrived. They were met by a fair-haired guy. He bowed down and showed an invitation with his hand. Chin Cheon-hee told the guy to come in because he needed to unpack all his things. The hero was very impressed by the building inside and outside. An ancient, beautiful castle, beautiful stone, huge columns, unusual roofs and facade. With surprise, it seemed to the guy that the room of the flying kite was somehow empty and abandoned. It didn't smell of goodness and fun, but everything turned out to be wrong. The place was very beautiful and turned out to be cozy. One of the students, Juho, was talking with other students. A lot of carrier pigeons came to the post office. He was interested in whether they had sorted out the letters. Hen was very surprised because he had never seen carrier pigeons and did not even know what they were. He recalled how pigeons were told in all sorts of novels. Trained birds are engaged in sending letters and parcels. For him it is so surprising, because such a small bird but so smart and capable. It was too unusual for him, after the stories about them, to see them in person. There was a conversation between the two guys, as Hyun heard. There was an official there. The man who brought him the letter said that carrier pigeons from Suramun and Changyeon arrived at the same time, and it looks like both heirs were injured as a result of Pimu. Yuho said that Suramun and Changyeon don't get along at home. This led them into a stupor, and they did not know what to do now. The guy asked the teacher if he would approve of their desire to be treated by him. Since they were enemies and did not get along, the decision was very questionable and a lot depended on it. They compared the wounds before making decisions, because the young Prince Suramun had a simple sword wound and his recovery would be faster. But Princess Changyeon had a more serious problem. Suramun used the Tokmun Cholgi technique, and the decision was that an ordinary local doctor could deal with the prince's wound, and he does not have to undergo treatment with them. Hen just stood aside and was amazed at how easily the teacher made conclusions. He admired every word and every decision. The teacher said that the best decision would be to send a reply letter to the prince so that he would simply observe bed rest, because this would be enough for him to heal a minor injury. She also said to write out prescriptions for puncture and internal wounds. She said that the composition of the medicines is too simple. They themselves can find everything they need in local pharmacies and prepare it themselves. Having listened and accepted all the teacher's instructions, Yuho asked who should send the letter first. The girl became thoughtful and began to think. From the looks of it, Princess Changyeon's condition is moderate. Despite her victory, her injuries are much more serious. The Changyeon house will be angry with them if they don't send the letter to them first. Little Hen still stood aside and was surprised at every word that the teacher dropped from his lips. Knowledge and literacy. Self-confidence surprised the guy more and more every minute. Yuho accepted all the teacher's words, bowed, and said that he would do all the instructions. The teacher said goodbye to them, took Hen's hand, and said that it was time for them to go. Hyun heard all the conversations and discussions around. He realized that this building was something like telemedicine, in modern terms. Having seen everything, we can conclude that it is not for nothing that Baekrin is one of the healing palaces of 3 generations of Heavenly. Among the beautiful mountains covered with fog, the sun has already set behind the horizon. People in this city live their normal lives, which means they continue to get sick and get wounds. For the Murim warriors who fight every day, this happens much more often because their lives are more at risk. The master told Hen that warriors from Murim are always in demand for help and are always in search of an infirmary and doctors. She also mentioned how important the exchange of information is between local hospitals, because every day they share the stories of the soldiers who came to them and offer help. Hen and the master got into the room. The master said that it was hers. Hen really liked the place, but it seemed too minimalistic. The girl told him to settle down, but he listened a little, because his gaze and surprise fell on the stove that stood in the middle of the room. The guy continued to look around the master's room. He did not find any various decorations or dishes there. Everything was too modest and neat, so the room seemed completely empty. The girl sat down on a chair and continued the story about different infirmaries, and why the exchange of information among themselves, with various knowledge and information, is so important for them. But she also said that all this does not apply to healing skills. As it was said in the martial arts Pin Pu Jeong, healers also cannot simply teach their skills from scratch without any knowledge of a person, because they have been going towards this for years, and not everyone was able to overcome the path and gain such knowledge. In addition to her story, the master said that a long time ago there appeared an organization of healers similar to the Murim Union. As it turned out, several clans are subordinate to the Palace of Doctors. They are also doctors' offices, and all the offices in Kanho exchange necessary and new information through doctors. The Healing Palace gathers all the doctors in case there is a war among the alliances. The girl continued the conversation further and further, but Hen's thoughts did not allow him to calmly listen to her words. He was surprised by all the information and the stories he heard, but he also thought that in the room it will be necessary to install a floor water heater. The master continued the story that there are medical departments in which medical